Have you ever walked through the streets of Paris, feeling both enchanted and completely lost at the same time? This is Wandering Dreamers in Paris, a podcast about the people who came here searching for something and found more than they ever expected. Behind every postcard, every cafe, every quiet street, there's a story of courage, confusion, reinvention, and becoming. I am your host, Stanzi, and in each episode, we meet someone who is building a life in Paris, with all its beauty and all its chaos. Let's begin. Today's guest lives between two worlds, the fast rhythm of the United States and the quiet poetry of Paris. A screenwriter and storyteller, he has spent years observing life through different lenses, collecting moments, cultures, and contradictions. Thank you for being here today. Well, I'm the one who's at your place.
No, a pleasure to have you. This will be fun.
So before we dive in, can you tell us something about who you are, what you've done? Can you present yourself?
My name is Scott Wright. I'm born and raised in America. I was born in Chicago and then started a radio career right after college. And so I moved all over the United States. I lived in St. Joseph, Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, Minneapolis, Sacramento, Philadelphia, San Diego, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Portland, New Orleans. For the last many years, I was in New York or Los Angeles, and I did that for about 20 years. I had a nationally syndicated show that was heard all over America for most of the 1980s. I was the most listened to radio personality in America.
What was your show about?
Played top 40 rock and roll, and then interviewed all the stars.
The artists.
All the artists.
Yes,
yeah.
It was a music show.
Music show, but the nationally syndicated show was all interviews.
Okay.
It was called Hitline USA, and we had one or two big stars on every week, and the audience could call in and actually talk to them and ask questions. And I did that until I had done everything I ever wanted to do in that business, and there was no new ground.
You knew everything.
I don't know that I knew everything. There was nothing new to do. If I continued to do it, it would have just been repeating stuff that I'd done, and I was kind of tired and burned out. I loved it, but it wasn't as much fun as it had been earlier on. And I was always very close to people in the music industry, and I grew up surrounded by music. My father owned a chain of record stores in America, so I always had free music, free records at home all the time. And I was 10 years old when the Beatles first exploded, and so that, the world changed. That was the first time there was ever
rock and roll
popular culture for young people. You know, before that it was all music, all culture was aimed at older adults, and so the first time there was teen culture, there was pop culture. So I was right at the heart of that. So I sort of grew up in that era. So I left radio and went into the music business for a number of years. I had a job as a marketing and promotion executive for Epic Records. And I got to work with some great artists there. I worked with Michael Jackson, Celine Dion, and Pearl Jam, and Ozzy Osbourne, and the Indigo Girls, all sorts of interesting stuff. And then I left Epic and joined a company that was a consultancy. We consulted all the major record companies and artist managers. So I got to work with everybody for a few years when I was at that company. And then again, I reached a point where I wasn't enjoying it as much, and I was looking for a new challenge.
Yes.
I had always been passionate about wine. My parents were very much into good food. My stepfather was very much into good wine, which was very uncommon in the United States.
Yes.
In that era. There wasn't a food and wine culture. People drank beer, they drank whiskey, but fine food and wine wasn't so much part of the thing. So I was exposed to that pretty young, And I discovered I had a taste for wine, and I noticed some wines I liked a lot more than others, and I was kind of fascinated by that. But it wasn't until much later in my career, when I was making a lot more money, that I could afford to buy good wine and really get into that. So the last few years I was in the music business, I was spending so much time on wine, buying wine at auctions, visiting wineries in Northern California. There were a lot of executives in the music business who were way into wine, and I became sort of like their wine guy in the music business. We would get together and have tasting groups, and I would go to auctions and buy wine for them and stuff like that. So my passion and my attention was focused on wine and not on my job. So I thought maybe I should go do this for a living. So I worked out a deal with my company where I could continue to consult them, but work remotely. This is way back before anybody worked remotely. So I moved from Los Angeles up to Napa Valley with the vague idea of doing something in the wine business. I didn't really know what. I met a few winemakers up there who were very kind, and I bugged them a lot and just asked them a billion questions, and a couple of them were nice enough to let me hang around and learn from them. And so before I knew it, we decided to start a small wine label, and I was very fortunate to be able to buy some fruit from some great vineyards, and then a friend of mine one of my winemaker friends allowed me to use some space in their winery to make wine. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I had good mentors who were looking over my shoulder to make sure I didn't screw it up too badly. And we were very lucky that our first release came out really well. It was a really lovely wine. We ended up on the cover of one of the big wine magazines, and got some nice reviews. And so this little winery we started, called Scott Paul Wines, very, very small. It was just my wife and I. We ran it out of our house, and with borrowed space at other wineries, and with no money. We started it with no money, really. We borrowed money from some friends to get it up and running. And it started doing pretty well, and so it grew a bit, and we decided what we really wanted to do was to focus the winery on Pinot Noir from Oregon, which is the best terroir for growing Pinot Noir in the U.S. The best place for Pinot Noir in the world is Burgundy here in France, but the next best place is probably in Oregon. So we moved up there, decided we wanted to focus our winery on Oregon Pinot Noir, and that's when it really kind of took off. We built the brand up, it started doing well. We brought in a business partner so we could grow the winery. We built our new facilities. Our partner planted a vineyard. A couple of years into that, we also decided to make the business more interesting. We might start importing some wines from France, specifically from Burgundy and Champagne, which are the two places I was most passionate about. And it was a way to grow the business without having to grow the production of our actual winery. And it made our tasting room at the winery very unique. People came to visit us and taste our wines. They could also taste wines that we were bringing in from Burgundy and Champagne from very cool small producers like us. And it turned out that import business actually started growing much faster and getting more traction than the winery itself. Our business partner, a big investor in the winery, wanted to grow our winery much bigger, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep it small and kind of boutique. And so we separated the two businesses. Basically, he kept the winery, we kept the import company. And my wife and I ran that for many, many years. Altogether, we were in that business for 25 years, and we sold that company 2.5 years ago. But in the middle of all that, my big passion throughout life, ever since I was very young, maybe 11 years old, was movies. My mom used to take me to a lot of movies. I was fascinated by the whole idea. I had no idea at times that was like somebody wrote them or what a director was or anything. I just loved movies, but I started really getting into it and became pretty fanatical about movies. When we were in Portland, in Oregon, a young filmmaker approached me to interview me for a documentary that he was making about people in the wine business who had done something else previously. Because in America, everybody who owns a winery, they didn't grow up in the wine business. It's not like in Europe.
It was something new.
Where their family had been doing it for generations. So there was someone like me who had been a disc jockey or a music executive. There were people who were former football players. There were people who were, doctors who retired to start a winery, just all sorts of interesting people. So he made a movie about that, and we became friends. And a couple of years after that, I approached him with the idea that it might be interesting to make a movie about what was happening in Burgundy. This was 2016, 2017, where climate change was really demonstrating how much it had changed, and it completely changed the growing conditions in the vineyards. People had lost half of their crop or more for several years in a row. They were struggling financially, and at the same time, the big luxury good companies like LVMH were buying up some wineries in Burgundy and Champagne, and it was changing the nature of the business. And being an insider there, having spent so much time there, while we were running that business, I was spending 3-4 months a year in France anyway, just working directly with all of our producers. So I had inside access to stuff that had never been filmed before. I thought we could get the real story. So we made a documentary called 3 Days of Glory, about what was happening in Burgundy at that time. So my partner David Baker and I, he was the filmmaker who filmed me for the movie previously. We did this together, and it came out really well. We just made it with very little money out of our own pockets, and it got picked up by Hulu, which is a big streaming platform in the U.S. So it's like, okay, wow, this is pretty cool. We can actually make movies and get them seen. So that really planted the bug. Okay, this is really what I want to do. My next chapter is going to be movies. And throughout all of that, I've always been a very passionate Francophile. I love France. I love the language. I love the culture. I had never spent a lot of time in Paris. I'd spent most of my time in Burgundy and Champagne for business. But the first time I was ever here, way before the whole wine thing ever started, I came over in 1989. A radio station here called WeFM hired me to consult them on their programming. French media was not terribly advanced at that time. They were maybe 10 or 20 years behind thinking and technology and the way they approached programming radio and TV. And there was a consulting company in the U.S. that had been approached. They wanted someone to come over to consult them in Paris, and they didn't know anybody who spoke French, and my French was okay at the time. So I said, yes, I would love to. So I took a temporary position to come over and consult this radio station in Paris. It was 1989. I arrived here and set foot in Paris for the first time and thought, oh my God, this is where I belong. It just felt like home to me immediately. I understood it. It just
clicked.
It just spoke to me.
Yeah. Is there something special, like architecture, people, something that hit you, or just general? Is this?
It's hard to say one thing in particular. It's a combination of the architecture, the culture, the food, how stimulating the city is. Every day you can go out and walk down a street you've never been on before and see something really cool, really exciting. It's like, wow, I didn't know that was here. It's endless. And I lived in Chicago and New York and LA where there's a lot of cool stuff going on, but something about it here, combination of everything being many, many, many centuries old and a very specific culture, which doesn't really exist in America. Yes, there's an American culture, but it's kind of different all over the country. And it's not as unified and not as solidified. When you're in France, you know you're in France. People are French, they live a French way, they think a French way. We all have our quirks and craziness, but somehow or other, that French culture and way of life just resonated with me. I thought, okay, this is me.
Do you know you probably have someone in your family that was French before?
I think my father, my biological father, who I never really knew, he and my mom got divorced before I was one. I think there was some French on his side. I've never actually researched it, but I was told that he was French and English.
There's maybe some...
Yeah, maybe a little
memories.
Something in the DNA. Yeah, my mother's side was all Swedish, and I definitely relate to the whole Scandinavian thing. I've visited Sweden and Denmark and really love it there. I couldn't live there because I don't think I could handle the winter and it being dark for 6 months. But
so it was really in 1989 when you really felt this.
My first exposure to Paris, yeah.
This love for the French culture, was it there before you came to France that time?
My curiosity had been piqued about it for sure. I started taking French, the language, in school when I was maybe 11 years old, and took it all through high school and college. At one time I was pretty fluent and then didn't use it for a long time, so you lose a lot of it.
Of course.
I always found pretty interesting, and French restaurants in America were always considered the best food, and so I was exposed to that pretty young. French wine that was on the table
your love for wine.
When I was growing up. So yeah, that all played into it for sure.
So when did you decide? You said, okay, I'm gonna stay in Paris or in France for half of the year. When did you decide that?
We decided to do it, I guess, in 2017. We took our daughter, it was her last year in high school at that time, and we took her out of the first semester of school to do a semester at high school in Burgundy. And so we spent the 3 or 4 months that fall in Burgundy in 2017. And then 2018, she was off to college, and we decided, my wife and I, to come over and do it again. And we spent the fall in Burgundy that year, 2018. And then 2019, our daughter decided she wanted to come over and do school over here. So we all came over in the fall of 2019. Our daughter went to business school here, and we stayed in Paris for the first time that year. And then COVID hit.
Oh, yes, that's right. And you were stuck in Paris?
Our daughter was. We left before you couldn't leave.
Yeah,
we went back to the U.S., and so we were stuck there for a little over a year. We were still in the wine business at that time. So because of the wine business, we were able to get a special permission to come in and out of the country. But then as soon as COVID was up, then we decided to come back and we rented an apartment here year round. Our daughter graduated school, she stayed, she's working here, she will probably be here forever. And so it's really since 2021, I guess, whenever we could get back in on a full-time basis from COVID, that we've been here. But we're still only doing half the year here.
You divide your time between the US and France. What's like to live with one foot here and one foot over there?
It has its complications. Quite often the thing you're looking for is not in the house that you're in. Where did I leave that? Oh, nice. I thought that was in Paris. No, it's here. It's interesting. I would like to, I think, live here full time, but my wife isn't quite ready to let go of that. And there's also a lot in the U.S. that I still like. A few years back, in 2016, we bought a cabin on a river outside of Portland, Oregon, about an hour and a half outside of the city, out in the Columbia River Gorge, which is this big, beautiful natural area, snow-peaked mountains, wild rivers, and the summer, the weather there is just so gorgeous.
So you don't want to
give that up. So we spend summer there.
Yeah.
And then we've been spending spring and fall in Paris. And then my wife is from New Orleans, and we met when I lived in New Orleans in 1993 for the first time. We moved away from New Orleans in 1995, but just recently have bought an apartment in New Orleans. So we're going to be spending some of the winter there. When we go back now for Christmas, we'll stay in New Orleans for January and February, and then come back here to Paris in March.
Are there some small things that you miss about each place when you're away?
I miss the sense of community that I have in Paris is actually stronger than I have in any of the places we live in the U.S. Maybe it's because Paris is a city and it's very dense, and it's people. It's more communal, more connected, and I know all the baristas at my favorite coffee shops, and I know the butcher and the guy who sells me fish, and the people at the vegetable stand that I go to, and I feel really, really connected here. In America, you just go to the grocery store, to the supermarket, and there's not that personal connection. The quality of the shopping experience is very different. The great grocery stores in America are very luxurious and elegant, and the quality is great. And you go to the grocery store here in Paris, it's kind of like, so there are things I like about both. I'm a cinema freak. I'm a movie nerd, and here in Paris, within a 5-minute walk from this apartment, there are 60 screens showing something great all day, every day. That doesn't exist in America like that. I think I have a much better chance of getting my films made here than I would in the U.S. They're more open to the kind of films that I want to see and the kind of films that I write that are, maybe not commercial blockbusters, but they have something interesting to say, and that's what they specialize here. Yeah, there's a very commercial side to French filmmaking as well. Ultimately it is a business, and people want to make money, but to have the support of the government agencies and of the various regions in France that support filmmaking, as well as Canal Plus and France Télévisions, and all these entities that it's a huge part of their budget is to support independent filmmaking.
And what process are you on right now?
I'm in the middle of a couple different projects. I've continued to make documentaries. I told you the one about Burgundy, then I made another one about a rock star from England, a guy named John Wright, and that came out in 2022, late 2022. Filmed that all during COVID, which was interesting. And then starting 2.5 years ago, started filming a documentary in Mexico about psychedelics and how psychedelic-assisted therapy has become a huge breakthrough in mental health, especially for older adults dealing with depression, trauma, anxiety, addiction problems. I took a psychedelic experience myself in Mexico about 3 years ago now, completely changed my life, and I thought it was absolutely fascinating. And the American woman who was the facilitator who guides the ceremonies, afterwards we were talking about my experience, and she said, "Something tells me you should be involved in this. You should do something in this space somehow." And I said, "Wow, that's interesting. I'd never thought about that at all," but it was an amazing experience, and totally turned my life around, especially emotionally.
Yes.
And she said, "I think there's a great movie to be made about this." And I said, "Well, that's interesting because that happens to be what I do." I'm a movie maker, a filmmaker, and I hadn't told her about that through our whole, it had never come up that that's what I was doing. So we decided to join forces and do this film about what's happening in psychedelics in terms of mental health. So she got 8 of her clients from around the world, people from the US, Canada, UK, to come into a retreat facility in Mexico, and these 8 people agreed to be filmed going through all of this. And I interviewed them extensively before, filmed the whole experience, interviewed them again the day after, and then went back a year later and interviewed them again to see how their lives had changed. And then we went on to interview a lot of the big researchers and experts in the field and people who've been working on it for the last 20 or 25 years. So we're in the editing process of doing that now. Okay. And that film will come out in hopefully like June of 2026. Okay. So that's going on. And in the middle of all that, I've also been writing screenplays. I've written 4 feature-length screenplays, none of which have been produced yet, but the most recent one is getting a lot of interest here in Paris. So.
Are they documentaries also?
No. These are just original stories. Yeah, fiction. Yeah.
Oh, and so how has living in France influenced the way you write? Has it changed something in you? Your team?
Yeah, a lot probably. I mean, the last 2 screenplays that I wrote were set in Paris. They're very Paris-focused stories. But they're international because Paris has become incredibly international. When I first started coming here, you hardly ever heard English anywhere, even in the shops or restaurants. Now all the billboards, all the signage, all the advertising, half of it is in English. You walk down the street, you hear more English than you hear French. You sit in a coffee shop and you hear more German, Spanish, Russian, Lithuanian, Italian than you do hear French. So the most recent screenplay is actually based in a coffee shop in Paris, and it follows the stories of a bunch of people who sort of hang out there and what's going on in their lives. And the stories don't necessarily have anything to do with each other, but over time they sort of wind together and it all connects at the end. So yeah, my writing's been very influenced by Paris and the culture here. And the one before that is about my daughter's world. She works in the fashion and luxury industry, and it's a story about three young people in that world and their lives in Paris. Two girls and a guy that fall in love with each other and become a throuple, but it's centered in the fashion and luxury world. And so from observing my daughter and her friends and seeing what their lives are like, that screenplay is really based on a lot of what I've observed and what she's told me about what's going on in that world. So yeah, that also could not have been written anywhere else.
Anywhere else,
Yeah.
yes.
I wanted to write fiction from the beginning,
Yeah.
and I started writing fiction 2019, that first year that we came over, and I wrote that with a friend of mine, and it was a great experience, and I think that came out pretty well, and now having written several more, I know how to go back and fix that one and make it better. But that was sort of autobiographical about my days in the radio business and hanging out with rock stars and stuff. So I always wanted to do that. Writing is maybe 5% inspiration and then 95% just hard work, grinding it out.
Of course.
And it's a craft. You have to learn the craft. I had no formal training in it. I didn't go to film school, but I read a ton of screenplays. I took some master classes, and just by doing it, started learning bit by bit.
Have you done any master classes here in France with French writers or French filmmakers?
Yeah. I've been to a few, and it's been fascinating. And I've got to meet a lot of people in the French film community, and they're very open, and they're very generous with their time, and they're accessible. In America, they're really not so much. You know, in Hollywood, if you're not somebody, the doors are closed, and you can knock all you want, and you know, maybe you have a 1 in a million chance of getting in. Here, you can actually meet people and talk to them. They'll give you their time. They will listen to you. They will read your script.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Were you expecting that Paris shape a little bit your creativity? Did you needed that from Paris, or it just came?
That's a great question. I spent most of my life being very introverted, very shy, very uncomfortable socially. It wasn't until I had my psychedelic experience that I was able to comfortably sit here and talk to you and talk about myself or talk about anything honestly. I was hiding behind a persona of being this radio guy, or being this music guy, or being this wine guy. So it took a lot of time to get there, but then that coincided with spending a lot of time in France. So I really first became comfortable with who I am here. And my wife would tell you that's absolutely true, that I became a different person here. Now I have a network of friends and people that I see and collaborators and people that I meet just to talk and just, get deeply into stuff. And that never existed for me before. Would it have developed in America? Maybe, probably could have been. I don't know. But for whatever reason, it happened here. Right place, right time, right guy.
And do you sometimes feel too French in the USA? Do you have those moments where you say, "Oh, maybe in France"?
Oh, yeah, sure.
It would be different.
We make fun of the French all the time, and we make fun of the Americans. And I'm sure a lot of our American friends and people in the family, think we've gone too French. But New Orleans is a very French influenced place. Yes. It was founded by the French, and there's a huge culture there. So actually, speaking another language, especially French, is not too uncommon there. So my wife and all her family and friends, everybody grew up taking French from the time they were, very, very young. So. So we're not as strange there as we would be in other parts of the country.
And the opposite, do you have some mindset or a habit from the US that just doesn't fit in France sometimes? I will have the awkward moments.
Huh.
A little bit too American or something.
Huh, that's interesting. Nothing
Yeah.
springs to mind. I think I've adapted so quickly to French life or Parisian life. And then when we go back to the US, I immediately slide back into that comfort zone.
Yeah, so you have the
Yeah.
switch.
Yeah, and it's not all that different,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess there are some subtle differences, and I think we have good quality of life in both places, but they're different.
Mm-hmm.
It's just culturally different, and just the physicality of it. You know, I'm 71 years old. I'm not going to change all that much at this point. You know, you get kind of locked into who you are, and you adapt it to wherever you go. And
Mm-hmm.
at some point, it's probably not going to be sustainable for us to keep going back and forth. And
Mm-hmm.
so we will, you know,
You're gonna have to choose.
we will settle, yeah, somewhere at some point. So we'll see that. I'm open to see how that evolves. But I definitely want to continue spending a lot of time here. Our daughter being here,
Of course.
and we're lucky that our daughter still likes us and wants to hang out with us.
And well, it all seems very, very lightful and happiness. But I remember you talked to me. You told me about French bureaucracy and how hard it has been. Like, can you
Yeah,
tell us
it is
about-
painful. Anytime you have to, you know, dealing with the visa or anything like that, it's a struggle.
That's the hardest thing in France you've lived. So
It seems. I mean, I think everybody will tell you that. You know, the administrative paperwork and then you get it all together and you go in for your thing and you're missing one thing, and they say, "Well, but you don't have this." But you said you gave me a list of what I needed and I brought all that. Yes, but you need this too. But they don't tell you that.
yeah.
And then you finally get everything and they say, okay, this is great. And then boom, they grant you your thing. But now you have to go ahead and get another appointment to make it official. And then you have to go online to make that appointment. And the appointment's impossible to get because they're all sold out. So you have to check 10 times a day to see if an appointment opens up. And then you get it. And then it's at a time where it's you know, the middle of December or January. It's freezing cold. And you have to stand outside the prefecture for 4 hours, freezing your butt off. To get in there and then wait for 2 hours while they all break for lunch. So yeah, that can be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. Is it worth it?
At the end of the day, I think so.
Yeah.
You know, we still are, you know, citizens of the U.S. We don't have citizenship here. We just have residency. We're not on the French healthcare system. We don't have a carte vitale or any of that. That would be the next step if we decide to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact of all those hoops you have to jump through to do that, that's
You're
a
not
little
sure.
that's a little daunting. It's like, okay, you really have to want to do it. You really have to want to do it.
It's a real test.
Yeah.
So now that you have two homes, what does it mean, the word home, to you now?
That's a great question. My wife and I have been wrestling with that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
She came from a place that is very rooted. New Orleans, people don't leave there. Home is a very distinct place in the culture. And we've lived a lot of places. We got married in New Orleans and then moved immediately to Los Angeles and then to Napa Valley and then to Portland. And then we've been going back and forth from the U.S. to France. So it comes up all the time. Where is home? Mm-hmm. I guess home is wherever we are. And because I moved so much as a young person early in my career, after college, I moved, you know, every year or 18 months for many, many years. So I don't feel rooted anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. Where is home?
Like the song, like you said, where you are. Home is where you are.
I guess it's where we are, but now that we've bought a place in New Orleans, I think that will feel more like home. But we were in the same house in Portland, Oregon for 24 years. So that very much felt like home. That's where our daughter was born and raised, so that's home to her. But now, you know, we're not there anymore. So yeah, we're kind of unrooted, but with roots in a few different places.
Different places.
Yeah.
You came from the music industry, though, so you know a lot of music, a lot of songs, a lot of artists, if your life between these both places were like a movie scene, what song would it play the background?
Oh, wow. What song would be playing in the background? I don't know. I guess it would be some like French pop music from the 1960s, Françoise Hardy or something like that. I love that stuff. Jane Birkin and Serge Gainsbourg, Johnny Hallyday. I'm fascinated with that era, as well as the movies from that era, from the Nouvelle Vague.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be something like that. It would be a scene out of a François Truffaut movie.
That's great. Would you like to say something else? What would you like people to
Just that I really love it here, and I felt very welcomed by France. And before we even started spending a lot of time in Paris, in the small villages in Burgundy and Champagne, there were 30 or 40 families, these winery owners that we worked with, that really took us into their lives, and spent a lot of time dining with them in their homes and getting to know their kids. And now their kids have grown up and taken over the wineries, and so feeling a part of that culture, getting to observe the French way of life through that lens has been really good. I feel welcomed and supported here. And I know they make fun of the Americans, and the Americans make fun of the French, and with good reason. On both sides, we're all crazy. But at the end of the day, I've found a really nice comfort zone, and have had an easier time finding community here. But a lot of that has to do with my own personal development.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Scott. It was a beautiful story.
Oh,
so
thank you. A pleasure, and excited to hear it when you put it all together.
Of course.
Paris is not always what we imagine. But maybe that's exactly where the magic begins. Thank you for listening to Wandering Dreamers in Paris. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And wherever you are in your journey, keep wandering, keep dreaming.